Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, timekeeper, and my fellow competitors. My name is Elena from SMA Kusuma Bangsa, Palembang, and I will be your Prime Minister of the government team for today. Now, my job as a Prime Minister of the government team is to define the motion, contextualize and framework the motion, outline our case, announce our case division, elaborate on our arguments, and then link back towards the motion. Now, today's motion is this House believes that scholarship should only be granted on the basis of financial necessity. Our stance as the government team is that we do agree with this motion and that scholarship should only be granted on the basis of financial necessity. Now, before we get towards the framework and argument, I would like to define the motion at hand. Scholarship is the financial support granted towards students based on critics and criteria such as academic achievements or others. There are two types of scholarship. There is financial necessity scholarships and then merit-based scholarships. Financial necessity is when a student cannot afford tuition for schools, while merit is when a school scouts students for their talents in order to pay for their education. Now, grant means given freely without payback, and overall this motion asks to grant free schooling for all middle class and lower kids who cannot afford to pay school tuitions in the form of scholarships, and to raise merit-based scholarships, and we would like to give financial necessity scholarships in the middle school, high school, and university levels. For context, Indonesia's government has a scholarship program for the poor in which they have successfully sent 418,000 people to school in the last 3 years, and this is only a fraction of the amount of people who actually need education in Indonesia. Now, they are given 6,600,000 rupiah per semester for tuition and living, and this has been said to encourage them, to enable them to break the chain of poverty. Now, according to a 2020 World Bank data, 10.19% of Indonesians live below the poverty line, and Indonesia only has a literacy rate of 95.9, which puts us at the second least literate country in the world. Indonesia's schooling system consists of 12 grades that consist of elementary, middle school, high school, and then university level. Now, to framework the motion and limit the motion, I would like to place this argument in Indonesia with the current literacy and poverty rates and the scholarships given to middle school, high school, and university level students. I have 3 arguments that I'm going to elaborate on today, and then the rest I will give on and hand off to my second speaker. Now, my first argument is about breaking the cycle of poverty. My second is about the need to afford basis. The third is about the lack of opportunity. Now, I will elaborate on my first argument. My first argument is breaking the cycle of poverty and the socioeconomic status. As we all know, breaking the socioeconomic status is not an easy thing. Indonesia has a poverty rate of 10.19%. This is a very high number, and a dropout rate of in elementary 0.11%, in high school 1.13, and in middle school 1.04. This puts us number 58 out of 165 countries globally. Now, the amount of poor people in Indonesia has skyrocketed in the past 2 years. In September 2019, we had 24.79 classified poor people, and in September 2020, we had 27.55. Again, this is because of COVID, and this means that in a pandemic setting right now, we have a lot of people who cannot afford to go to school and who had to drop out of school. Now, 43% of workers did not finish high school and only finished either elementary school or middle school. And this means they do not get paid enough because of the wage inequality gap in Indonesia, and this fuels on to continue the chain of poverty in Indonesia. Because, again, there's a higher demand for S1 graduates as a minimum criteria for most jobs in Indonesia. In SMK, people who only finish SMK gets paid around 2.75 million, SMA 2.73, SMP 2.01, SD 1.79, and people who did not finish SD 1.54. This is a big gap in wage. And let's take an example. If we were to have, let's say, a father, and let's take the worst case scenario, this father gets paid 1.54 million per month, and that is not enough for him to pay for basic living necessities for his wife and 2 kids, boy and a girl. Now, the girl would most likely be taking up house chores and learn how to cook, how to clean in order to become a housewife in the future, while the boy would take on his father's skills and then again, down the line, continue his father's line of work. And this continues to fuel the poverty cycle. Because if the boy does not go to school at the age that he's in, and he goes to work in the future, he's not going to get paid as much as his middle class or higher class peers are. And this means he's going to get paid less, and he's going to live again below the poverty line, and this fuels on the poverty cycle, and we cannot press down on the amount of poverty-stricken people in Indonesia. Now, if we were to give them scholarships based on financial necessity, the boy and the girl can live a life without having to depend on a husband, and the boy is able to break through the cycle because he gets paid more, because he gets a higher education. And that's why this house believes that scholarships should only be granted on the basis of financial necessity. Now, onto my second argument, the need to afford basis. Now, the amount of money needed for elementary kids are 2.4 million, middle school kids 4.23, high school kids 6.5, and university students 15.3. This is only for school tuition, not including living and transport expenses. This means that poor people usually cannot afford schooling because, again, for someone to be classified as poor in Indonesia, you need to have an income of 425K or lower, according to a 2019 data based on Detik Finance. Now, this means that middle-class people are more likely to finish school than poor people are. And the amount of free schools in Indonesia that cater toward these poor people are only 199 elementary schools, 48 SLDP, and 26 SMA. This is not enough for the entirety of Indonesia. And this means that a lot of poverty-stricken kids does not get to finish school, and then again does not have enough drive to compete in the workforce in the future. And that means they don't get the same amount of jobs, they don't get the same amount of wage that their middle class and higher class counterparts do. This means they do not get an equal fighting chance in bettering their lives. If we were to give them a scholarship based on financial necessity, they are given an equal fighting chance. They are given the same amount of support that their middle class and higher class peers are given. And that's why this house believes that scholarship should be granted on the basis of financial necessity. Now, onto my third and last argument, the lack of opportunity and inequality. Now, J.K. Rowling, Faraday, Ralph Lauren, and Noble, what do these people have in common? They all came from poor families. This proves that there are geniuses out there living below the poverty line, and because of said inequality, they are undiscovered. What we want is to push equality for all poverty-stricken people. We want all of them to have an equal fighting chance. One of the basic human rights is the right to work and education, and giving a scholarship to these people who cannot afford it will give them a basic human right and basic human decency to better their lives in the future. Now, we need to erase merit-based scholarships and funnel these funds towards people with financial necessity, because everyone deserves a fighting chance and the right to a decent life. And that's why this house believes that scholarships should only be granted on the basis of financial necessity. Thank you.